Are there any amendments to the amendment in the nature of a substitute? For what purpose does the gentlelady from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.Res. 1238, offered by Ms. Scanlon.
Without objection, the amendment will be considered as read. The gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I was a school board member for almost a decade, finishing my final term in 2015, the end of that year. During that time, I had countless conversations with involved parents and constituents in grocery stores, at school concerts, on soccer fields, and at formal board meetings about how our schools could best serve our children and our taxpayers. Sometimes these discussions were emotional or passionate, and people didn't always agree. But everyone always respected our democratic processes and the boundaries of civility and protected speech as we sought to reach the best possible solutions for our community. Not once in that decade did we ever experience threats to the personal safety of board members, educators, or their families, not even when the lacrosse team showed up to protest a coaching change. But something changed over the past few years as partisan divides grew and bad actors, both foreign and domestic, exploited those divisions for political gain. We've seen teachers, school officials, and school board members across America and their families, their children, endure threats and violence because partisan operatives, fueled with dark money, sought to create chaos in our communities in order to promote their own political ambitions. School board members in Bucks and Montgomery counties near my district in southeastern Pennsylvania have received threats evoking gas chambers and acts of physical violence. School boards in my district had to suspend meetings and call police when brawls erupted. At a school board meeting in Virginia, a parent announced that she would bring, quote, every single gun loaded and ready to her child's school. In Arizona, police arrested a father after he stormed his child's principal's office with zip ties. As a former school board member, these incidents are really disturbing, and they should disturb everybody, anybody who understands that political violence is a threat to democracy and to the rule of law. And it's not just school officials who've been targeted by those more interested in creating chaos than serving our communities. We've seen threats and violent behavior being levied against public servants at all levels, including election workers, nurses, librarians, elected officials, and in recent weeks, towards FBI agents and record keepers at the National Archives. How are public employees supposed to teach children, run elections, or serve the public under constant threats of violence? How can we encourage Americans to serve the community, to teach, to run for office, or work at government agencies if doing so places them or their families in danger? This is not normal. Political violence is un-American. Our Republican colleagues have tried to frame criminal acts to intimidate school board officials as examples of protected free speech by caring and involved parents. But any reasonable person can see the difference between threats of violence and legitimate political discourse. Things have clearly gotten out of hand. We teach our children in schools that words matter and that they have consequences. However, when Republicans deny the seriousness of vandalism and threats of violence against school officials and their families, and the extremist rhetoric that inspires them, when they encourage such conduct instead of condemning it, they endanger the lives of elected officials, teachers, school staff, and our children. And the inflammatory rhetoric we've heard today continues the pattern of stoking grievances and polarizing our communities rather than helping our communities work together. Our colleagues seek to reframe criminal harassment, threats, and assaults against school leaders and their families as normal parental behavior by stoking the same kind of right-wing conspiracy theories that encourage those threats in the first place. My amendment will ensure that members of the House receive fair and balanced information regarding the extremely real and concerning threats made towards schools, school boards, educators, and school staff, and not just cherry-picked information to support another MAGA conspiracy theory. I encourage all of my colleagues to support this amendment, and I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back. Who seeks recognition? What purpose does the gentleman from North Carolina seek recognition?
To speak on the amendment.
Gentleman is recognized.
I would first ask the gentlelady whether she would vote against an unfavorable report for the inquiry if it included her amendment.
I think that remains to be seen since we're going to see what happens with the amendment, but I suspect it will follow the same path as most amendments in this committee.
Well, you think the amendment will fail? Is that what you're saying? That's what it would follow the course of most amendments, because that's what I've observed is they never really get serious consideration.
No, I think this amendment should pass because I think most Americans understand that it's not normal for school board members to be attacked, for educators to be threatened, for their families to be threatened, and that's why we would ask that my amendment be made in order. Thank you. I yield back.
I have no problem with the amendment being made in order. The question is, what you said you assume it will pass. I guess I'd love to give you another opportunity, but if you're saying that you don't know whether you'll vote for the resolution of inquiry or not, if it carries your amendment, I'm just trying to understand if your amendment's in good faith.
Oh, the amendment is absolutely in good faith. I wish the resolution were.
If it were so amended, though, you intend to oppose the resolution anyway. Is that correct?
I didn't say that. I said I wish the resolution
Will you
was in
disclose
good
what you
faith.
intend to do? I take it you will not, which makes it pretty clear. I think the other, and so, look, there's no doubt that on an isolated basis, there have been some threats against school board members. And there's been gross rhetoric. It's really important for this Committee on the Judiciary to know the difference between the two. I was at a ceremony last night, which I thought had the pretty admirable theme of being devoted to supporting and preserving life in America. There were protesters outside the whole time who apparently don't want to preserve life, and they chanted really things I can't repeat here at the dais at us as we entered and left. I guess I can summarize it. F you fascists, they said, they sang over and over again as they pounded a drum. Now that's not very polite, but they certainly have a First Amendment right to it. The chairman opened this debate, and in the course of giving some examples, he spoke about an incident that occurred it was alleged to have occurred, I haven't seen a transcript, at the school board meeting in Orange County, North Carolina. Now, those who know, I went to Chapel Hill at University of North Carolina. It's in Orange County. It's the most leftist county in North Carolina, and the chairman of that school board is a leftist. And she reported that someone, that people that she said they wore, I guess, a caps that indicated they were members of the Proud Boys, or shirts and hats. This is 2 men in Proud Boys shirts and hats. One wore a stocking over his face. Well, of course, you know, things were being worn over faces. They were required to be worn. I never thought that was a really good idea, but they were required to be worn, which completely obscured his entire face for the whole meeting. Now, that's a little unusual, but it sort of makes me think about Portland. There's been no FBI nationwide memorandum on that one. Black bloc, but that's been widely respected by the left for some reason. Said the other one told our board during public comment that someone should tie rocks around our necks and we should throw ourselves in a river. I think they maybe have been referring to the Bible verse about one who does this to the least of these would better have millstones put around their neck and thrown into the river, and I can't remember precisely how that goes, but it's a Bible verse they were making reference to. But there's no threat in that language. There's no statement that the person speaking said, "I'm going to tie millstones around your neck and throw you in a river." And that distinction is quite important. But in fact, what the amendment on its face does acknowledge is that there was coordination and communication between the White House and the National Association of School Boards to develop this theme of threats, when much of what is talked about is core First Amendment activity, whether we like the tone of the activity or not. It's really important to distinguish between the two. My time's expired.
Time of the gentleman has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from Rhode Island seek recognition?
I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. I want to thank the gentlelady from Pennsylvania for her amendment and for helping to focus the committee's attention on the very real issue of violence against school board officials and school officials in connection with the era in which we're living, where political violence seems to be becoming more and more common, and how dangerous that is for our country and our democracy and for the brave men and women who work in public education all across this country. But I am here to report to the gentlelady from Pennsylvania that this resolution has nothing to do with that, because of course this is about a made-up story that causes the Republicans to do big posters, because this made-up story about calling parents terrorists is so politically powerful. They've poll tested it, and they know it's really powerful. Even if it's not true, you just keep using it, and it will help you win, political points and maybe win elections. And they know that. They know it's actually not true at all, but it's valuable politically, and so they do big posters. I will guarantee you every Republican member on this committee is going to clip their remarks today. Tune in later tonight on Fox. You'll see it again, how they're defending parents who are being called terrorists by Democrats. All made up, but it's theater to produce a hit or a clip for television. So let me just remind everyone, as I've done, I think, at 4 other hearings, of the facts. This is made up because the memo that Mr. Jordan always makes reference to, which is dated October 20th, 2021, which I'd ask be made part of the record, actually makes no reference to parents being tagged as terrorists. In fact, the word parent isn't even in the memo. Then you have the testimony of Justice Garland under oath before this committee, and he said, and I quote, "I want to be clear. The Justice Department supports and defends the First Amendment right of parents to complain as vociferously as they wish about the education of their children, about the curriculum taught in schools. That is not what the memorandum is about at all, nor does it use the words domestic terrorism or Patriot Act. Like you, I can't imagine any circumstance in which the Patriot Act would be used in the circumstances of parents complaining about their children, nor can I imagine a circumstance where they would be labeled as domestic terrorists." I ask that be part of the record. And then in the report, in the memorandum, it talks about threats of violence or the use of violence against school board members and school board officials. So this is made up. Now, you don't have to take my word for it. There were 3 separate analyses, just to be sure, about this false claim. The first one was done by Fact Check, and it says, Attorney General never called concerned parents domestic terrorists. So the claim is false. Okay, that's number 1. I'd ask that be made part of the record.
Without objection.
Second fact check done by USA Today. Fact check, FBI is not using threat tags on parents who protest at school board meetings. I ask that be made part of the record.
Without objection.
There's a third fact check, if you really need to be convinced. No, the FBI isn't adding threat tags for parents who protest school boards. This is PolitiFact from November 19th, 2021. I'd ask that be made part of the record.
Without objection.
So this is not true. It's made up. It's an effort to try to politicize or take advantage of this issue to win. And it's really disappointing because, as Ms. Scanlon's amendment makes clear, this is actually a real problem with school boards and a real problem with the safety of individuals who are serving in the public school system. And it is, in my view, not only reckless and irresponsible, but deeply sad that rather than being serious about the rising violence at school board meetings, being stoked by people who think that's the correct way to respond to political disagreements, we have colleagues on this very committee who are continuing to promote something that just didn't happen because they think it will help them, putting their desire to get back into power over even the best interests of the people we serve. And I say that sincerely. This is a sad, sad use of this committee's time to again promote something which is simply not true. No matter how many times they say it, it doesn't change the facts. And so I urge you to support the amendment and defeat the underlying resolution and not be part of this ongoing charade, this ongoing false narrative that is intended to make people angry about something that simply didn't happen. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields